Good afternoon and welcome to our final session of our Ducks in a Row series this week. Today's presentation is called Funeral Options 2.0. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Beverly and I'm the Communications Manager of People's Memorial Association. And we'd like to start today off by acknowledging that we are here on the traditional, ancestral, and ceded territory of the Coast Salish, Duwamish, and Suquamish nations. Most of the PMA staff lives right here in the Seattle metro area, though we do serve the entire state of Washington. To begin with, just a couple of standard housekeeping items. We're going to go ahead and keep all of our participants on mute today. Don't worry if you're scrambling to jot down notes as our presenter speaks. I am recording today's session, and I will make sure that you receive a follow-up email with the recording of today's session, as well as these slides from our presenter. If any questions come up for you, please feel free to drop those in the chat box or use the Q&A feature. If you're a little on the shy side, please feel free to directly message your question to me, and I promise I'll keep your identity secret. Just in case you don't know what PMA is all about, I am here with some fast facts for you. We are the oldest and largest memorial society in the United States. We were actually founded right here in Seattle back in 1939. We're the only nonprofit in Washington providing funeral education and advocacy services. But fear not, if you're joining us from a little further afield, there's about 60 other organizations under the umbrella of the National Funeral Consumers Alliance. So it's distinctly possible there's a similar organization a little closer to your own home doing some similar work. To date, over 216,000 people have become members of PMA. And of those folks, about 71,000 of them are still living, so we stay very busy in the office. When we think about how we serve all of those folks, one of the biggest functions we have at PMA is making educational resources available. We offer classes just like this. We host resources on our website, on our social media platforms, and we answer a lot of phone calls. We're just here trying to get you the information you need to make informed choices for your friends and family. Aside from that educational piece, we're pretty proud of our successes with some state-level legislative lobbying. Our big focuses are increasing funeral choice, increasing price transparency. It's a notoriously opaque industry, the funeral industry, and we're working to try and do what we can to improve that. And finally, in Washington, we're blessed to have an incredible diversity of people that live here, and all of them deserve equitable access to dignified funeral arrangements that meet their needs, whether they be financial, spiritual, or emotional, and we're just trying to do what we can to make sure those remain accessible. And a big part of accessibility is financial accessibility. So we spend a lot of time doing what we can to keep cremation affordable, as well as burial, and aquamation, and natural organic reduction. We're going to learn a little bit more about all those options, but if one of those options is specifically interesting to you, feel free to take a deeper dive on our website and see what you can learn. If you're thinking this might be for you, I'm pleased to let you know lifetime membership is only $50 per person, and that's a one-time fee. So after you submit that application, you're stuck with us for life. Kind of the biggest selling point, I think, for most folks about becoming a member of PMA, aside from all the education and the advocacy stuff, is that we are contracted with about 25 funeral homes around the state of Washington. And when we think 4 cemeteries, a monuments company, a pet funeral home, a virtual funeral service, just a whole host of businesses that serve families at end of life. And we've pre-negotiated price discounts through those businesses for our members. And it helps to reduce the amount of surprises you might encounter when you're already grieving and trying to keep a lot of plates in the air. So we're really, we take a lot of pride in our ability to ensure that you're not going to get that used car experience when you've already got so much you're trying to take care of. Aside from all those things, we're also just deeply proud of our own co-op funeral home right here in Seattle. This is a really unique business model. It's one of the only businesses of its kind in the United States. And so all of the members of PMA share membership of the co-op funeral home. Just a quick reminder, this was part of a series, so that you're going to be receiving some emails over the course of the next few days with the resources from those sessions and today's session. I'm looking forward to getting those recordings all up on our website so you can view them all in one easy way. And I'm also really excited, and I hope that I can maybe bring back a couple of you all in September for a Death Careers Week series. I promise it's going to be the first thing like that you've probably ever seen. It's going to be wonderful. And before we bring on our expert speaker, I just want to say thank you. Even showing up just for this introduction is a big step in getting your wishes organized and written down and advocating for what your wants and needs are. And it's community members like you that make PMA what it is. If you feel so called, we would just love it if you'd visit our website, peoplesmemorial.org, and make a gift of any size. Every donation is an essential part of helping us serve Washingtonians. And it's not like a big, hefty gift, major philanthropic choice that makes the difference. I always say this is an organization built off of the back of crumpled $5 bills from little old ladies' handbags. So every little bit makes a huge difference for the Washington family. That's enough for me with all the boring stuff. I know the real reason you all are here is to meet Rachel LeBlanc. She is a funeral director intern from our co-op funeral home. And maybe if you were here a couple months ago for Green Funerals Week, you already got kind of a taste of her presentation style and her particular passion for aquamation. But today she's going to be here telling you about all of the legal disposition options for your body in Washington. Welcome back, Rachel.
Hello. Yes. Thank you, Beverly. Yes, I'm talking about everything equally today. Yeah, let's get started. Yes, my name is Rachel, and I am a funeral director intern license at the Co-op Funeral Home of People's Memorial. So this means I talk about death all day. And much of that time is spent talking to the family and friends of the deceased. And let's see, what is this? Oh, got a chat already. That's great. Yes, please feel free to add to the chat and add questions as I go along, and we'll certainly address those at least by the end of the presentation.
I'll keep my eyes on that so you can focus on your slides.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, we had it all queued up, but now my slideshow has decided to start on the, there we go. Okay. So as I was saying, I talk about death all day at work, and much of that time is spent talking to the family and friends of the deceased. So one of our first questions that we ask in some form is, what will we be helping arrange for you? And the best case scenario to this question is when the next of kin that says that not only have they discussed with their deceased loved one what they want to have happen, but they've put it down in writing. And here in Washington State, the best way to ensure that you get in death what you wanted in life is to put it in writing. Often folks include it in as a section of their will. However, People's Memorial Association, which I'm going to refer to as PMA through this presentation, also is a handy form that is sent to all of our members, which is formatted to make it really simple to spell out what you want. Legally, whatever document you use has to be signed and dated by you, and then also by a witness. There's the handy arrow there to show at the bottom. And it does need to be signed by you. I can't tell you how many times we've had power of attorneys or spouses sign this form, ignoring the fact that it says only the declarant can sign, not the POA or spouse. Can't do that. I know sometimes people think they're trying to be sneaky with signing that, but the law is the law. It needs to just be the person. The witness does not need to be a notary public. The witness can be your neighbor, a relative. It can be anybody. And here's the thing. It doesn't have to be this fancy form either. It can certainly be literally, you could write on a piece of paper, I, your name, want cremation. Make sure you sign and date it and have, that witness sign and date, and make copies of it, give it to your trusted contacts who'll be handling your arrangements, and that's legally binding. Be sure to mention the law to really make it official. I'll have the law on the screen here in a second, but it's RCW 6850-160. But we do have this easy form available from People's Memorial. So definitely please reach out to our membership office to have one sent to you if you don't already, and it'll come with a packet of other really helpful forms. So maybe you didn't get a chance to put it in writing, you weren't expecting to die so soon, but the next best answer is when your trusted contact tells us they're certain what you wanted because you both discussed it. This is wonderful too, really. I know that it's kind of taboo in our culture to talk about death, but it's unavoidable, it's inevitable. So we need to get that discussion going with your loved ones. And obviously you're here tuned in with me today to get educated on your choices. This is a great first step. I'm really glad that you're here with me today. So if your trusted contact at least knows what you wanted, we can very easily have them sign our paperwork authorizing what we're going to do with your body. And obviously the hardest time for the next of kin is when they have no clue what to do with you. There was no discussion, and now they're hearing different things from various family members. Also, sorry, I'm in the dark. We had internet troubles, and this is the best place I could be. I wanted to be well lit for this one, but you know, I guess I'm the funeral director talking to you from the shadows today. Anyway, you know, you have a family that you have Aunt Susie who wants a cremation for you, Cousin Diane wants a full conventional burial, and the contact that we're talking to is in the middle trying to sort it all out. And this is where I should underscore, death is not an emergency. The possible chaos and stress that may have occurred through dying is fortunately over. And though it definitely feels like a heavy burden to those left behind, working with the funeral home should be relaxed and handled in a way that leaves everyone feeling like you were treated in death with respect, how you wanted. And I always tell families all the time, no rush, please take your time, I'm working at your pace. But obviously the absolute best way to help your next of kin avoid feeling stressed is to discuss what you want, fill it out in paperwork ahead of time, plan what funeral home you'll be entrusting with your remains. None of this is emergency, and it's easier to figure out now while you're perfectly happy, or pardon me, happy and healthy. All this talk about next of kin, trusted contact, who am I talking about here? Let's go over Washington state law and how it determines who has the authority to tell me, the funeral director, what to do with your remains. So first and foremost, the top tier is that piece of paper you're going to go home and write your wishes on, sign a date, and get that witness to sign as soon as this talk is over, right? But seriously, your own written disposition authorization and or prepaid arrangement takes precedence over anybody else. Beyond putting into writing what you wish to have happen, another thing that's great to put into writing is a designated agent. Much like the disposition authorization, you must sign and date and have a witness sign and date. And again, the witness doesn't need to be a notary public. It should be somebody who's not the person that's the designated agent, just so there's no like conflict of interest. And PMA also does have a handy form for this too. So again, you can ask the membership office for one of those if you'd like, or it's also on our website to download and print. A designated agent is similar to a power of attorney, but for funeral arrangements. And just to be clear, because we run into this almost every day, the power of attorney does end at death. And so it's really difficult when I have to tell a power of attorney, like, I'm sorry, but the law differentiates you from the designated agent or next of kin who's handling the funeral arrangements. So if you have a power of attorney that you trust with your healthcare while you're dying, name that person your designated agent so they can also help after your death. The designated agent is also really useful for those who wish to have a non-family member, such as a good friend, or maybe you have your significant partner that you're not going to get married to, but you're together for, long enough that they practically are your spouse. It's really good to have them be your designated agent because then they can oversee your cremation or burial arrangements. And declaring someone your designated agent in writing, again, signed, dated with a witness sign and date, takes precedence over anyone in your biological family. Let's say you didn't fill one of those out either. Then the state puts the following family in charge. First, your legal spouse or registered domestic partner. If you don't have one of those, then it falls to your children over the age of 18. If you do have more than 2 children, we must collect a majority consensus. So such as 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4, 3 out of 5, and so on. If no adult children or spouse exist, and your parents are still alive, then we must gain authorization from them. If both of your parents are also deceased, then it falls on your siblings to make your decision. And I have to share, it seems like siblings often have some of the hardest time with death. So if your siblings are left to make your arrangements, I would highly, highly recommend doing your sisters and brothers a favor and filling out your disposition authorization on your designated agent forms now. I see you popped on, Beverly. Is there some good questions?
Yeah, this is a really good one, actually. So for folks that have multiple people that they think would be a good fit for a designated agent, can they designate multiple people or should they have backup? Like, how is that decided?
Yeah, so what I've seen, the state has you assign one person as your designated agent, but then you certainly will have like a second or third backup. And I've even seen that in wills too, where someone names, I want this person to be in charge. But to Karen asking, so if your son and daughter are your designated agents, yeah, they could certainly share, especially like say if your spouse isn't here with us anymore. And so it would probably be your son and daughter doing the arrangements, then, legally they would both have equal say. As I was saying with the children and also with siblings, we have to get majority consensus. And if there's 2 of them, a son and a daughter, they both have to agree together on what we're going to be doing with you if you didn't put it in writing yourself. So, yeah.
I see that you included at the bottom of your list the most responsible party available. Are there any limits on people that can't be designated?
Yeah. So, if you don't have an immediate family, perhaps you might be under a court-appointed guardianship or a state agency is handling your affairs, then they would be in charge of deciding. And almost always they simply choose cremation. But yeah, to what you're saying, Beverly, at number 10, after all of those other people, if you have no immediate family members and you aren't under the care of the state, then the law has us simply go to what's most responsible party available. So we'd make an effort to locate some family member, such as an uncle or a grandparent. And if they aren't available, then that friend or neighbor who was like, hey, my neighbor's died, we would just proceed with making arrangements with them. So, yeah. And then, if the legally appointed next of kin cannot make a decision or no one can be located whatsoever, then once 90 days have passed, the funeral home or the medical examiner makes the decision. And it's almost always cremation, just being the least expensive and most accessible choice. So they're making decisions, they're signing paperwork for us. And a question that we sometimes get is, who's responsible for payment? Legally, the next of kin or designated agent is responsible for an equal percentage if there's more than one. In practice, though, 99% of the families I've served had had one point person handle the payment. And that person usually is who also has access to the deceased's estate from which they're going to take the funds. If your family just really has no money like whatsoever, or, you know, unfortunately are a homeless community, the county does have what they call an indigenous cremation fund. But that's also like the county is going to be making the decisions too. And again, it's probably just going to be cremation. If your family wants to be involved, but unfortunately, you know, just for whatever reason, you don't have that much funds, dying is expensive. PMA does have a cremation assistance program for families in need. And there's an application information on the website. So if you go to peoplesmemorial.org and then click under resources, you can click through to that information. I could expound on next of kin further, but that's a general overview and we only have so much time today. So let's get into the options that are at your literal disposal. Let's start with cremation since it's the most widely selected. In fact, Washington State, approximately 80% of our citizens are cremated. And this makes sense since according to one of the textbooks that they make you read to have this job, cremation is the oldest form of disposition in human history. It's the top choice as it's very accessible, being the lowest cost option available. Per PMA's biannual price survey, where they research as many funeral homes, general price lists across the entire state every other year, the cost for cremation varies wildly in Washington State, but the average is about $1,600. For PMA members, the cost is significantly lower at $845 at partnering funeral homes, like the Co-op Funeral Home. It's also the quickest process, taking about 4 hours or slightly longer, depending on your size. Oops, I didn't want to go to that slide yet. You know, just a few extra hours for the remaining bones to be cooled before processing into the ashes that are returned to the family. And of course, we're all familiar with those ashes and how they can be placed in an urn, set on a shelf. And I have a photo here of a few options that we have, like wood, beautiful handcrafted stone, classic brass. They can also be placed at a cemetery, either buried in the ground, a memorial wall, or a columbarium. And here's me visiting the Chapel of the Chimes in Oakland. And those are all niches with glass with the urns behind me that you can see. Beautiful, huge, huge building, just chock full of ashes. Let's see. You can, of course, also scatter and on land. Technically, legally, you may spread the ashes on your own private property or with permission on another person's land and state or national park land. And I took a photo here on the left. You know, the simple box that our crematory sends ashes to the funeral home in is perfectly fine. The ashes are in a bag. You can open it up and just scatter the ashes from there. Sometimes families like a little bit more ceremony than that. And so I took a photo of one of these scattering urns that we have. It's made out of bamboo, and you can see the lid twists open to kind of be like a little like spice jar is how I describe it. You can also spread the ashes in water so long as it's a navigable waterway. And again, you could just open the bag and put the ashes into the water, but some families like having these nice, I don't know if you can see my cursor, probably not, but these nice water burial, they're made out of paper, handmade, really nice. Fun fact, when it's not COVID quarantine time, you can also pre-arrange with Washington State Ferries Department to toss your loved one's ashes held in one of those urns pictured above from the ferry. They'll even pause, make a solemn announcement over the PA, and toot the foghorn. I don't believe they're allowing that with current COVID restrictions, but you can certainly contact them if you want more information. There's also all sorts of fancy things you can do with cremated remains, like combine them with sterling silver for jewelry, blend them into glow and blast pieces. I've even heard of people putting them in pencils or vinyl records. Since we've been cremating since the dawn of time, we've come up with some clever things to do with ashes. All right, so here's some frequently asked questions regarding cremation. Yes, a witness cremation is an option, and this means you can watch the placement of your loved one into the machine called a retort. You don't see anything gruesome, just the placement and the door closing. This is often requested for certain religions, such as Hinduism. However, families of many backgrounds request it as a touching final goodbye. You are allowed to place items with your loved one's bodies to be cremated too. And I've seen all sorts of things from photos and beloved trinkets to certain leafy green plant people love here in Washington State. Glass and batteries are a huge no-no for cremation retorts. So those things are the main restrictions. So dad's well-worn hat, thumbs up. Dad's old bifocals, nope, since they're made out of glass. And the other questions we receive from time to time, no, you cannot obtain the remaining bone fragments in their bony state. Legally, we must process the bones into unrecognizable ashes. Also, returning gold teeth fillings is not really a thing. Firstly, fillings containing gold have such a nominal amount of gold in them. They're mainly base metals, which would just cremate with the rest of your body. However, if a family is insistent they want the fillings, they must hire a specialized dentist to come extract the tooth, which can be quite expensive. Given how little gold there actually is in a filling, the only person who's going to make money off of the ordeal is that dentist. And for other implants, we can usually return a titanium implant to the family. However, generally that remaining metal is simply recycled. So overall, cremation is tried and true. It's lowest cost, and there's quite a bit of flexibility in terms of handling the body before, with viewings and witness placements and options for the remains after. So we're all familiar with how cremation uses fire, which I have the cremation retort, which looks pretty much like the one our facility uses here on the left. However, there's a newer option in town, which is quite similar. As you can see, the machine for Aquamation is right here, this photo I took, and it looks almost the same as that machine on the left, but it uses water. And legally, it's known as alkaline hydrolysis, this option. I'm going to call it Aquamation, which is like the name on the street. It became an option here in Washington in May of 2020. I personally actually arranged the first case that happened here in Washington State in October of this last year of 2020. Unfortunately, it's currently only legal as an option in 19 states and a handful of Canadian provinces. However, it's not a new process. It was patented in 1888 and has been used for about the last 25 years at institutions like the Mayo Clinic, UCLA, and Duke University. While it's slowly catching on, more and more people are choosing it as it's perhaps the most environmentally friendly option. Well, one of the most, I guess, because I'm about to talk about recompose, but it's one of the most environmentally friendly options. It uses 1/8 the amount of energy as a cremation, and there are 0 direct carbon emissions like there is with cremation. And as shown in that photo, much like cremation, your body is placed into a machine. However, this one fills up with pressurized water and a bit of an alkaline solution, about 5 to 15% of the total volume. This may seem like it would use a lot of water, but it comes out to being about the same amount that you would have used in a regular day, just, using the bathroom and washing dishes and stuff. The cost is more than cremation. However, it's still accessible when compared to other options. Not too many funeral homes in Washington state offer it yet, as there's only one machine operating in the state currently. But for PMA members, the cost at funeral home partners who are offering Aquamation is $1,250 and $1,500 for non-members. Being new, Aquamation wasn't included in last year's PMA price survey, but I have seen other funeral homes in the state charging even up to like $2,000 to $3,000 for Aquamation. So the price will vary greatly depending on which funeral home you choose for this option as well. Like cremation, Aquamation takes an average of 4 hours, and when it's done, what also remains are your bones, which are processed into a powder similar to the ashes you receive for cremation. And here's a picture I was allowed to take from the family of this decedent. And you can see that because they haven't been carbonized by flame like cremation, the powder is much finer, it's the color of bone, and there's about 30% more in volume. Aquamated remains can then be treated the exact same way as cremated remains, like I talked about. So whether placed in an urn or scattered, all the options I talked about with cremated remains. And some tidbits about this process, which I guess I didn't include a slide about this. The Aquamation, alkaline hydrolysis is also known as resumation, flameless cremation, water cremation, and other euphemisms. It's essentially an accelerated version of the natural process that would happen with your body after death. So it is seen as a gentler option to flame-based cremation. Your body is reduced down to its most basic molecular building blocks. You can also have a witness aquamation, where you would also simply watch the deceased be placed into the machine and the door closed. With either cremation or aquamation, if you do a witness, you can even push the start button if that's something you're into. Unlike cremation, though, you can't place anything in the machine with the body. There are very few exceptions, like Washington state law requires the person be wrapped in biodegradable bags before placement, and 100% raw silk or leather could be used for that, but it does depend on the facility's policies. So if aquamation is something that you're thinking about, definitely check it. And you want to be like wrapped in silk or something, like check with the funeral home you're working with to just ensure that their facility can do that. And with cremation, any metal from implants or fillings and whatnot would simply be recycled. And I think the way a client summed it up for me, with permission to share with you, actually the same client whose mom those remains were, perfectly summed up why they chose aquamation. She said, "When mom passed, we were looking for other options besides the standard cremation or embalming. We wanted something more peaceful and respectful of the earth. We came across aquamation. This was an appealing option for us for several reasons. Water is a symbol of transformation and rebirth. Mom was an English teacher for 42 years and was always looking for symbolism. It felt like a more peaceful option for us than fire cremation. We also liked that the remains were not as ashy, so to speak. They are fine and pure. Due to this, there's also more that is actually her. We also loved that it is a greener option. Even though it's a bit more costly than cremation, for an alternative to fire cremation, it was a reasonable price and it worked with our timeline. We're very happy with our choice." I guess that's a little redundant, but I just wanted to underscore how, how it's important to people.
Can I ask you a chemistry question?
Yeah.
One of our attendees is curious. Oh goodness, the picture is curious about the alkaline side of alkaline hydrolysis. Do you know why those are the particular types of chemicals used to break the body down?
Yeah. I'm looking at the time, so I'm like, oh, I couldn't expound on this forever. I almost feel like for my hour-long presentation on Aquamation. Much like how we use alkaline, so it's typically potassium hydroxide, which is a common chemical used in like soaps and cleaners, hair relaxers. So much like how it's used in those products to break down natural fats, like say in soap, like you're trying to get like grease and stuff off your hands. It works the exact same way. So, it just sort of is, what did I say in my other presentation? It's like the most clean you're going to get in life.
Oh yeah. I've heard that
I
before.
can certainly get into that more at the end. But yeah, so that's what it's going to do is help break down the, if you're not in Seattle, but in Washington State, how do you transport? So yeah, so like I said, not a lot of funeral homes are offering it. Some are, but we, like a co-op funeral home, we offer Aquamation, and we've certainly like been contacted by someone up in Bellingham because there wasn't a funeral home up there. There is an additional transportation cost since our baseline included in our package, that $12.50, is within a 30-mile radius. But, we can certainly, if you want to work with us for Aquamation, I mean, we'll pick you up like all the way, and Walla Walla if we need to. So, so yeah, certainly we can get you to the facility if that's what you want. And I did keep this photo of Dion Stromer since it makes Beverly giggle every time she sees it. He's one of the pioneers of getting alkaline hydrolysis as an option legalized across the United States. And this is him and his machine down in Portland, Oregon. Okay. So a third option you have above ground, which was also legalized in May 2019, in effect in May of 2020 with Aquamation, is natural organic reduction. So now added to my handy slide here to just kind of compare what the situation looks like for natural organic reduction. You may have heard of this option referred to as Recompose, which is the company who pioneered it, or as they plainly state, human composting. Recompose's founder and her team have been working, and this is them here, and that's the founder there in the orange pants. They've been working on this process since legalization since 2014, originally under the name the Urban Death Project, becoming the iteration they are today, a public benefit corporation, in 2017. They worked alongside institutions like Western Carolina University's Forensic Anthropology Department and Washington State University. Currently, there is, I believe, one other entity that offers natural organic reduction here in Washington, and I think there was a third that was trying to get off the ground, but by and large, Recompose is it if you wish to have this option. It was engineered here in Washington, but it was legalized in Oregon and Colorado just in the past few months. PMA actually had a hand in bringing the legislature forward here in Washington, and they handled their first case, Recompose did, in December 2020. Currently, Recompose is comparable to the full cost of a burial, about $5,500. They also handle all of their clients directly, serving as both a facility and a funeral home. So if you're interested in this option, you will need to contact Recompose directly. But our PMA members can receive a 5% discount on the cost if pre-planning with Recompose. So much like cremation and Aquamation, now I forgot. Oh yeah, okay. I was like, I don't remember what my slides look like. So I'll go back to this one. But much like cremation and Aquamation, as you can see, your body's placed into a vessel. However, instead of being surrounded by flame or water, you're surrounded by plant material such as wood chips, alfalfa, and straw, containing microbes who love to get to work reducing your body into its basic molecular level. So it's actually similar to Aquamation in that regard, as it too is essentially an accelerated process of what would happen naturally. except it returns your body to the earth in about a month's time. They say about 30 days. And what remains for all intents and purposes is nutrient-dense soil, about a cubic yard's worth. And the deceased's next of kin, your family, has the option to receive the soil for their own use in your garden, or you can donate it to Recompose's nonprofit partner, Bell's Mountain, which is a 700-acre land trust in southern Washington, where it would be used to help rehabilitate the land to its natural glory. It's kind of like a lot of the state, you know, a very overlogged and now sort of just like, you know, tossed away piece of land. So a group came along and is rehabilitating it. There's no trace of in the soil of having originated from a human when the process is complete. And as with cremation and aquamation, any lingering metal would be sifted out and recycled. So Recompose is really capturing attention because it's so revolutionary. Aquamation is pretty dang eco-friendly, but probably doesn't get much more eco-friendly than natural organic reduction. Unfortunately, it is a very limited choice having the one main facility currently, but they are a super dedicated organization and it's exciting to watch this option unfold. You can find out a lot more about their history and the process in detail at their website, recompose.life. That's right, no .com or .org or such that you're used to, just recompose.life. Yeah, nope, you're just entirely soil, not like with cremation or aquamation where there would be bones left over that the family would receive in ash form or powder form. It completely is pretty much the only thing left would be a metal hull implants, like any plastics or metals, and then those would just be sifted out of the soil and recycled. Okay, I know we've had all this talk about exciting new options, but there is a lot of merit in burial and certainly a lot of choice with this option too. Obviously, burial is an option we humans have also been doing since the dawn of time with a wide range of placements from graves, like you see on the left, catacombs, and even slide churches, like in the middle. And the picture there on the right is a family participating in a green burial up at Mole's Green Acres outside of Bellingham. Conventional burial in the sense of how we imagine it here in the United States with embalming and, you know, a metal casket, it really only became the accepted norm in the 1860s, with many cultural aspects taking root around that same time. But today, people can really make burial such a personalized option with their own ideas and tastes of how it should be handled. And whether conventional or green, burial must be done within a legal cemetery. So along with talking to a funeral home to handle the arrangements and paperwork, you'll also need to connect with a cemetery of your choice. Burial can cost, based on PMA's price survey of nearly every funeral home in Washington state, an average of $2,900. That's shy of $3,000 for a direct burial. And that's just with no ceremony whatsoever, just literally driving you to in a casket to the cemetery. Plots or graves at cemeteries typically start around $2,000 and go up from there. So for a burial, you should expect to plan to set aside at least $5,000, though you will likely also have other expenses like the casket, preparation requests, and any other upgrades like a hearse or special monuments. So when you're making these decisions for burial, you largely have two avenues, conventional and green, though you can certainly combine aspects of green into conventional. And conventional is, as I was saying, what we tend to picture as Americans when we hear burial. The deceased is likely embalmed, dressed, and placed into a typically a metal casket, which is then placed into a grave with a liner or vault, such as a layer of concrete in the grave. Green burial is somewhat the opposite. The deceased is not embalmed and is placed in a biodegradable casket, typically 100% wood, though there are some woven basket-like options like you see on the left, using seagrass or bamboo, or an organic cotton shroud like you see there on the right. I did have a case where the decedent's mother had made this beautiful silk shroud years and years ago, and she used it for her own burial. It was a really lovely personalized aspect to the burial. And with green burial, the casket or shroud is then placed directly into the earth, usually in a more shallow grave than what's used for conventional burial, with no liner or vault. With a conventional burial, cemeteries will have a predetermined aesthetic and landscape. Washington State has 6 cemeteries that offer dedicated green burial plots, in which the family is actually encouraged to select a plant or two to be planted on top of the grave. So you're kind of involved with that landscape at green burials. Or in a few of the cases, the land itself is conservation forest, so you're buried among the existing trees. In either cemetery type, it's good to understanding that purchasing a plot is not purchasing the land. The cemetery still has full ownership over the property and could decide their own rules and policies. For instance, vaults are typically required for conventional burial as it helps keep the lawns level, making for easier caretaking. Cemetery also gets to decide size restrictions on monuments and markers, hours of visitation, and other aspects for personalizing the gravesite. And while you're thinking about options, if burial is what resonates with you, also make a list of what's important to you in a cemetery so that you come prepared with questions when you talk to one. Because note that unlike funeral homes, cemeteries are actually not legally required by federal law to provide you with a price list. So you can often not find one on their websites or even over the phone. And I was going to go over frequently asked questions about burial, but I noticed we only have 10 minutes left, so maybe I should skip over all of that. I was just going to say that, nope, you can't be buried on your own land. It must be a legal cemetery. Embalming is not a legal requirement anywhere in the United States, so do not feel pressured to have it done. If a funeral home tries to persuade you into it, that can actually be quite an extra cost. And then a person can be placed in the casket, not only fully clothed, but with relics from their own life. I remember one fun family buried dad with like a bottle of whiskey and a pack of cigarettes and a knick-knack and other various hymn items. Families ask if other people's ashes or even their pets' ashes can be placed in the casket, but that's definitely per the cemetery's policy. So be sure to ask them what's acceptable to bury beyond the casket and deceased. And as I mentioned, you can certainly make greener options even if you choose a conventional cemetery. So you can elect not to be embalmed and placed in a biodegradable casket, even if there'll still be a concrete grave liner. That's certainly something that a lot of our families choose when they do burial. On the other hand, maybe you choose a full conventional burial with embalming and a really elegant metal casket with a motorcade and crispy manicured cemetery for the tradition and ceremony, because that's important to you and your family. And that's a beautiful lasting memory for people. So, really the point of this discussion today is to help you consider what's important for yourself and your loved ones when you come to the end of your time in this current form. So real quick, one other option is full body donation. There are a couple of institutions here in Washington who do accept full body donations, UW, Bastyr, Wazoo. You can donate your entire body or some of your tissues, such as your corneas or certain organs. Sight Life handles corneas and Life Center Northwest handles organs and tissue donations. It's a wonderful gesture to give yourself to science. I know I used to wish for something like being sent to the Forensic Osteology Research Facility of Western Carolina University, that school that helped recompose. But I think I decided it would be too expensive, too much trouble to try to fly me out to that school. If this is an option you want to have for yourself, you absolutely should reach out to the institution of choice to confirm their policies and your eligibility. They usually have a number of restrictions in place, so it's good to gain the best understanding possible. And have a second choice in case it doesn't work out. You may also need to still decide which of the other options should be carried out after the program has completed their needs with your donation. I also get asked this from time to time, but just because your driver's license says that you're a donor, it does not necessarily mean you will be one. This is at the discretion of the hospital where you may die. And honestly, after a certain age, most organs are not taken for transplant to other patients as they aren't considered as viable as someone from a younger age. So definitely advise to do research if you're interested in anatomical donation. So beyond the type of, to answer your question, we don't really help, funeral homes don't usually really help with body donations. That's something that the family would need to coordinate directly with one of these, schools or programs. So typically, like if we get a notification of death and you're at a hospital, say like Sight Life is coming in to take your corneas, they'll come into the morgue at the hospital, take the tissue out of your eyes, and then our transportation team can come in then and bring you into our care. So definitely our relationship is just giving you that information. You would have to contact them directly. That's a good question too, though. All right, so beyond type of disposition, there are, of course, other funeral options to consider. What are your cultural and personal traditions? If you're being buried, either full body, is there another question?
Yeah, I'm gonna wait a second so you can finish on your last couple slides.
Oh yeah. We'll get to that. It's a good question, but yeah, let's let me finish here. So I know I promise we're gonna be done almost at 5 o'clock on the dot, as close as possible. So what are your cultural and personal traditions? If you're being buried either full body or as cremated or aquamated remains, will there be a graveside service or just a direct delivery to the cemetery? For any option, do you wish to have a funeral where your body is present at the location, such as a church, maybe a simple viewing at the mortuary, or none at all? Perhaps a memorial where the body's not present, only loved ones gathered in memory. Home funerals are also encouraged here at PMA. We have at least one partnering funeral home who specializes in helping families arrange them. In fact, often families who choose a home funeral do so that the funeral home is as involved as little as possible. Typically, the family would prepare the body with washing and dressing before it lays in state in the home for up to 3 days. Dry ice or some other form of cold keeping would be used to prolong the condition before the body is then transferred to the crematory or cemetery. And, caring for one's dead directly has been the norm for centuries. In fact, it's like I said, only since like the end of the 1800s did it become expected that a third party would be involved. So there has been a movement in the last decade, especially to return to this mode. However, definitely the vast majority of people still choose to work with a funeral home for the simplicity and ease. So if all of these questions feel overwhelming to hear now, it can feel extremely overwhelming for next of kin to answer during their immediate grief period when they're talking to the funeral home. So we absolutely recommend PMA, think about these choices, spend some time while you can, leisurely and comfortably, think about them. Talk with your loved ones and put them down in writing. Don't forget those signatures, so that it's as simple as saying, here, she wrote it down to the funeral director. Okay, on that note, to end it off, Let's quickly go over the role of the funeral home in all of this and how you can feel empowered to choose the one that's right for you. Generally, the funeral director's job is to help with filing the necessary paperwork to make any of this happen that I just talked about. So for instance, with my day-to-day, I'm filing the death record with the county and the state who are going to sign off on what they need to sign off on, as well as ensuring the doctor adds the cause of death in a timely manner. There's so many signatures in death care. So I can get what Washington calls the burial transit permit, and the permit's required by crematory, aquamation facility, natural organic reduction facility, and cemetery alike, so they can carry out their work. Of course, at the immediate time of death, we're coordinating with our transport team and whoever is the best contact at your place of death to bring you into our care. We'll also be talking to your next of kin as per my opening section to determine what will be happening with your body. And from there, we'll help coordinate whatever additional needs are involved, like a crematory, cemetery, etc. We can also help you with any extras you wish to add, like cremation jewelry or casket options. And of course, working with PMA, partnering funeral homes, means these choices are yours to make, no upselling involved. With that said, when you're deciding on a funeral home, I always tell my friends and family, be sure you feel comfortable with the funeral director. Remember, you are, after all, the customer with this person providing you with a service. So if for any reason you aren't feeling it, much like how you'd leave a restaurant giving you bad vibes, you can certainly decide you don't want to go with that funeral home down the street from your house after all. Read reviews, ask people who you trust, look at Google, do some research, consult that PMA price survey. It's on our website, to ensure they respectfully carry out your wishes. Like with the home funeral, you can technically do virtually all of this process yourself, including driving the deceased to the crematory or cemetery, preparing them for burial, and so forth, with perhaps only involving a funeral director to file the paperwork for the burial transit permit. However, in this day and age, most people find it easier to just have a funeral home involved. Though I do love when a family wants to get involved as much as possible to make it a truly personalized experience. So yeah, we, shop around, like I said. And like I said, federal law requires the general price list when you set foot on premises. If you call a funeral home, they have to give you a price quote. Yeah. Should I say something about, I can't believe I just fit all that in.
I'm impressed. You are really flying through this information.
It was certainly an information-packed hour. Hope I've given all of you here somewhat of a start towards discussing your funeral with your loved ones and researching what options resonate with you. Do you want me to say really quick about prepayment, Beverly, or?
I think it's an important thing, and I'm sure it's on a lot of folks' mind because you have mentioned, the prices of different things, and it does make the wheels start spinning about how you're going to finance some of this stuff.
Definitely. Yeah. So here in Washington State, the law is that if you want to prepay for your funeral, it has to be placed into an escrow, which basically means we're going to be starting a insurance policy for you, very similar to like a life insurance policy. And the number one thing I hear from families who want to prepay is, I just want to make sure that like my family doesn't have to do anything, when I die, like they don't need to be involved whatsoever, which is great. That's very kind of you to think. But if you're going to do a prepayment, know that because it's an insurance policy, we all see how much paperwork comes with insurance policies. So they are at least going to have to sign off on releasing those funds to the funeral home. So they are still going to have to get involved. We often really recommend, instead of doing a prepayment insurance policy, that families consider a pay on death account. Like I know Salal Credit Union offers one. And, you know, you could even simply just open an additional savings account at your preferred bank and then sign who your trusted contact next of kin is going to be as, you know, an additional holder on that account. So then all they would simply have to do is just withdraw that money at the bank and give it to us, you know, and no like insurance paperwork, you know. And then a third note here, if you do have like a standard regular life insurance policy, you certainly can also use that to pay the funeral home out. And the thing about prepayment, it does not lock in the prices. That's definitely a question we get asked about that as well. If a funeral home tells you it locks in the price, they're probably also like charging more than what their current price is to like, you know, make up for possible inflation. So yeah, it doesn't lock in the price. If you do like overpay on your prepayment, you know, legally, they have to give you whatever they don't use for your funeral back, except for if you do a spend down for Medicaid. And it's very smart if you are trying to do a spend down with Medicaid, that's a good time to do a prepayment. So yeah, if you have more questions about that, give us a call. I actually don't do prepayments yet as an intern license. So maybe next year I'll be able to give you those policies. But yeah, and then we have this cheesy little end rest in peace. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. So I can't answer the do ashes or aquamation ashes add nutrients to the soil? They do not. Actually, that is a common like cringe with funeral directors, is like, you know, there's been some people who are like, oh, I have this fancy idea where I'm going to put the ashes into this pod with a tree seed, and then the tree is going to grow from the ashes. No. Ashes are primarily salts and, you know, the calcium carbonate that make up your bone, which naturally is very alkaline. So even with alkaline hydrolysis, like the resultant fluid that is easily disposed of, that's inert, like that pH level is balanced. But our bones themselves naturally lean towards alkaline. So, you know, if you're like putting a whole bunch of ashes, you know, whether from cremation or aquamation onto a plant, it's going to, you know, it could choke those plants' roots. So not advised to put ashes into the soil.
Can I add a modification to what you said?
Yeah.
There's a compromise though. You don't have to use an entire urn of ashes. You know, as a fellow tree hugger, I'm very connected to this idea and I get lots of questions about it. And a great compromise could be to scatter a token amount of ashes. You know, maybe a tablespoon or something to that effect. But it's something that's in such high demand that there are some scientists who are working on some different types of soil amendments so that you can sort of cut the ashes with them to try and mitigate some of those negative environmental impacts of the ashes and then still grow some plants. I think that's one of the coolest things that I've seen. But also, I did some research about this last year and found out that there are certain types of plants that tolerate those ashes better. So if you do decide to do that token amount, maybe look into plants that grow well in acidic environments that flourish in really salty soil, like hydrangeas, which are beautiful. So there's ways to work with it.
That's true. But I also think, you know, emphasis on what you said, that it's like a tablespoon that you're using. Yeah. It's like, you know, ashes, whether they're aquamated or cremated or like, you know, several worth.
That makes me think, you know, that's one of the questions that we field most frequently at PMA. When you get ashes back, like, how much ashes do you get? Like, what's the volume?
It ranges between 8 and 15 pounds. Yeah, which definitely when people pick up the ashes from us, they're like, oh my God, this is heavier than I thought. Because it is, I mean, with cremation, it's like the larger bone fragments. So it's going to be like heavier bone parts, like your hips and whatnot. And with aquamation, it's pretty much literally your entire skeleton. So, bones are heavy.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions lingering out in the audience? I know that we just hit you with a real tsunami of information, but there's just so much good stuff, and we want to make sure you have at least the starting point of whatever your pending research spiral is this weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'll talk for a second so you guys can think about how to word your questions.
Yeah, well, it looks like someone has a question about if they're out of state and a PMA member.
Okay, let me take a look at that.
Thank you.
So if you are thinking that maybe prepaying for one of those options is, in line with where your finances are at right now, unfortunately at PMA, we can't really help you with that because we're an educational nonprofit. It would be best to contact the funeral home directly, and then those folks can walk you through what your options are, and also touching base with your own financial institution about what some of those prepay options were that Rachel mentioned. Those folks, I feel like if I were prepaying, I would prefer to talk to my bank about it than the business that benefits from it. But it's worth researching and getting a couple perspectives on, because it's a big investment, it's a big purchase, and you should be sure of what you're getting and have a really clear vision of what all's included and what's not. Let's see. Oh, we have someone who is asking about the other Ducks in a Row session. So today's session is part of a free webinar series, and the first two sessions earlier this week were also recorded. And so all of these are going to be available on our website. I'm going to be sending out today's recording to everyone that was registered for today's session, and you can go ahead and share that with your friends and family, or you can visit our website or our YouTube and see those videos there as well. So if you need to check back on something that you missed in your notes, that'll be very easy to do, especially after I send you all the slides that Rachel was using. Let's see, what else we got? I'm sure you guys have questions lingering, or did Rachel just cover everything because she was so thorough? All right, well, no worries if it's going to take a second to chew on this information, figure out what your question is. The major point of this is just to give you that overview of what are the options, what does the law require, and then that kind of can help point you in the right direction as you have these discussions with your friends and family. Feel free to contact either me or Rachel at the Co-op Funeral Home. I'll make sure that you have contact information for both of us so you can reach out, get those questions answered. And, if we don't know the answer, I'm sure we can connect you up to a community partner who specializes in the subject. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It's been a delight, and I hope this promises to be a good start to your weekend, a little spooky perhaps. Thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing your expertise.
Hey, thanks for asking me.
Part of this program.
Thanks for asking. I look forward to doing the removal transportation tech for next month's careers.
Oh, yeah. I'll include some info in that follow-up information on what to expect from future programming, just like Rachel mentioned. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your weekend.